Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies. And no, you're not seeing things. Flashbacks is here. It only took me several months to get one recorded. Sorry. I have no excuse. I'm not going to make one.
No, you're not saying a flashback.
I am slacking off. But it's funny because I said we were going to do Last Starfighter like 2 years ago. So finally, here we are. So let me fix that. Okay. We are here to talk about what I believe is one of the greatest space operas of all time. I may be a little biased with my nostalgia goggles. We will find out. I am Scott, and with me is
Ryan.
And let me go ahead and introduce you to one of my favorite movies. So let me give you a little synopsis of The Last Starfighter for people who haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself to check it out. They released a Blu-ray copy a few years ago. It still holds up. It is an amazing, amazing film from 1984. Not that I'm burying the lead or anything. So, Alex Rogan is an all-American teenager living in a trailer park. He longs to get out, but he can't get the scholarships he needs to go to college. He's basically living in Trump's America. So he spends his free time trying to stay away from girls and playing Starfighter, a video game. In fact, the most awesome 80s arcade game ever. I wish I had a Starfighter console in my basement right now. After Alex makes the high score, he is met by Centauri, an alien who tells him that the game is a test to find the best pilots in the galaxy. Centauri brings Alex to the Rylon Star League on Rylos, where he is called upon to defend the frontier from Zur and the Kodan Armada. Alex decides he'd rather not and returns to Earth. Soon after, Zur, with the help of a spy, destroys the Star League's base and kills all the starfighters. He also sends bounty hunters to kill Alex, the last of the starfighters. Alex decides to return to Rylos to save the galaxy, and Centauri takes him only to die soon after being shot by one of the bounty hunters before they left Earth. Centauri does leave behind an android version of Alex, Beta, in order to keep Zur thinking that Alex is on Earth. Alex meets up with Grig, his navigator, and takes the last Gunstar, a prototype starfighter, to the frontier to stop the Armada. Under Grig's mentorship, Alex learns that he does have what it takes to be one of the best pilots in the galaxy, and with his one ship, he fights off the entire Armada. While back on Earth, his girlfriend Maggie and Beta stop the bounty hunters from contacting Zur. Alex forces the main ship to crash into a moon after Zur escapes, and Grig and Alex return to Earth after learning that Centauri was dead but got better, and Alex decides to return to Rylos to help rebuild the fleet, and Maggie joins him. They leave Earth while listening to the greatest sci-fi theme of all time. So, Ryan, tell me your first impressions of The Last Starfighter.
Thanks for letting me come back to Flashbacks. I love talking about old films. For me, Last Starfighter is a nostalgia feel because I saw this when I was young, and you have that kind of angst, not knowing what you're going to be able to do, but you have a movie like Starfighter that shows you playing video games actually amounts to something. To me, I remember watching this on TV mainly and getting interested and then going to the video store and renting it and seeing this movie that for the 80s, using CGI for the first time and doing really well with it, really showed what the industry was getting into, but how they can make these sci-fi epics more believable. And to me, seeing that really helped me get into science fiction. But more importantly, showing that kids can play video games and actually amount to something. You can be whoever you want. But if you have a talent and you're good at it, go for it. And I think that's the central message. This game was prepping Alex to be the last starfighter, and he owned it and found his courage, and he became who he was, which was the last starfighter. So for me, that underlying theme of self-discovery and Alex being down on his luck without his scholarship and not knowing what his future is, that's just that message of hope that Last Starfighter kind of portrayed. that there's always something out there for you. You just might not know it yet. Really hit home for me as a young kid, and just told me to be who I was, and whatever I'm destined for will eventually come to me. So, yeah,
As long as you play a shit ton of arcade games.
I will. Yeah, Galaga.
This see, that's the whole thing. Back in the '80s, we had Galaga. I wanted Starfighter. Starfighter looks so much better than Galaga. That being said, I played the hell out of Galaga. Not so much as my mother, though. My mother would sit there at the Nintendo and just stare at the screen for hours, obliterating aliens with her Galaga ship.
No one could beat her high score, huh?
Oh no, she had the high score of the family, and I think Centauri would have wanted to talk to her. She was pretty well into it. So this movie came out in 1984. I was the ripe old age of 1, so I didn't catch it in the theaters. But HBO played this nonstop, and I was one of the lucky kids who got to have HBO when we only had 15 channels on cable TV. And so I remember seeing this a lot. I probably saw Last Starfighter before I saw Star Wars, and so it definitely is a very it's ingrained into my soul, this movie. But not only do I have nostalgia goggles for this, but it is an amazing film. I've watched it over and over again as an adult, and it holds up.
Holds up.
Again, and they threw it out on Blu-ray, and it looks amazing. And the cinematography, we start out in the trailer park, and it's got that Americana feel, and it's the crane work as we zoom into the trailer park and everything else. I mean, it's a very well put together film, and as you mentioned, just the story of this kid who can't even get out of there, can't even go to college, even though he's been accepted, but he can't find the cash to go, and he's able to find a way out, not only out of the trailer park, but out of the planet. And it's got everything you want, and like a good uplifting story. And as I've already kind of teased, the soundtrack of this movie is amazing. I'm going to get nailed for copyright, but I'm going to play some of the soundtrack at the end just because you need to hear it if you haven't heard it. But no, I mean, I love this movie, and I continue to love this movie. And it's one of those few from the '80s where I remember loving it, and then going back to it, still love it. So, what are some things you like about the movie, Ryan?
For me, the use of the CGI. You know, you look at it now and you're like, whoa. That's very raw. It's not as polished, but back then, that was the creme de la creme. I mean, you have to think about that when you watch older movies, what you're watching, and that was what technology had for them back then, or had. That's the technology they had back then. So they used what they had, and they did it well. I mean, all the shots were all CGI. Anything that was besides makeup or explosion, everything that was space was all done with CGI. And for them to use that in the manner in which they did and still produced a good film, like, when you see films nowadays, like, I mentioned when we did full disclosure for Black Panther, my one big kick was the CGI fight at the end. You could just tell that was all done in a lab. It's almost so quirky that it fits, and that's the best part. And that's, you talked about nostalgia. It almost looks like a video game from the 1980s. I also enjoyed the comedic aspect of it. The whole Beta and Alex thing, when they're sitting there talking after Alex comes back and he wants to, he passed on Starfighter and he just wants to live his life on Earth, and he's talking to Beta, which Centauri left there in case, he was found that he was missing and he has an alibi. But when they're sitting there talking, and Lewis, his younger brother, wakes up, and they're sitting there talking to him back and forth while Beta's under the bed and Alex is standing up, is just comedic genius. Very good story. For me, I really enjoyed the special effects because I can enjoy what they were working with, and it fits for the movie, and just the comedic aspect of the stories while also being a sci-fi epic. I really enjoyed too the special effects in terms of makeup. I mean, Lord Krill, Centauri, the Zans, which were the bounty hunters, they all had some aspect of special effects makeup. And it was all done well. Lord Krill, which is who Zur had banded with, I mean, he's full makeup, and it's awesome. And that's what I really love about 80s movies, is that they really rely heavily on that special effects makeup, and it's flawless. When you can do that with the special effects movies like this or Star Wars, it's good. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that CGI for a minute, because this is the first film to use CGI as practical effects. Now, Tron came before this, but Tron didn't use the CGI for practical effects. It used it in a computer world because that's what they could do with the line graphics.
As a backup.
This one, their budget was so slim that they knew, and their timeline was so slim. The studio gave them a certain amount of time. And they said, do it. They knew they could not do this with model work. It was not going to be enough time. It was going to take them too much money. So they went to digital productions and said, hey, you've never done this before, but we've seen some of your work, and we think you can pull this off. And so they use a supercomputer. And there's a documentary on the Blu-ray that you should really check out if you haven't. And it's just fun to watch. This supercomputer they have benches around it, so they can sit in it. And they said they would just sit there for hours and listen to it hum as it rendered. So they created 27 minutes of this movie is made in that Cray supercomputer, and it was about 300 scenes, and the whole thing required only half the time and a half to a third the cost of traditional special effects, which made this movie come in at $14 million so it could make a profit. It still didn't make a huge profit, which is why we don't talk about Last Starfighter 5, 6, and 7 or anything, but it made enough of a profit to make this reliable. And I'm with you. I hate when CGI looks bad and it's kind of thrown in, but you're right. Because this film is of the age it is, it looks better because you're not expecting perfect stuff. But they did a lot of work to make it look good. When you're looking at the Starfighters at Rylos, they actually built a mock-up of one of the wings. So when you're seeing them come through on the conveyor belt, the first thing is you see a practical effect of the wing going in front of the actors, so you can see that it's there, you get the depth of it, and then they go to the CGI. So your mind's already thinking, okay, I know what this looks like, and then they go to it. Same thing when they land on Earth at the end. They've got the mock-up of the legs, so you can see that the actors are with something, they're seeing something physical. And then also they got so much smoke going on around there that it's kind of making it look more realistic than what it would be, which is really smart. And it's something that freaking George Lucas couldn't figure out in the prequels. The reason why the prequels look so bad is because no actor was ever with anything. They were just looking at a green screen. The actors had, be it only a leg to look at, but they had something to look at. So it made things easier for them. It's really impressive how they were able to do this. And again, if you haven't seen the movie, you should. But if you haven't seen the movie, you're thinking, okay, 80s CGI, this is going to look terrible. This looks pretty damn good. It would hold up probably in the 90s, late 90s. Obviously not now, but I think it was about 10 years ahead of its time, and you can definitely see that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for me, there's just so much that I love about this. The characters have so much just appeal to them. Greg is an amazing character. They got a character actor to play him, and underneath the makeup, it worked out so well. Played by Dan O'Hurley, and he just was able to do so much with that, with his gravelly laugh, talking about his kids in the desert and the caves and everything else. And then Centauri, who was played by Robert Preston, is amazing, because what they did was they said Centauri is a salesman. He is a shyster. His job is to come in there and say, I've created this game, and I'm going to send it across the universe to Earth, and I'm going to get a kid. And even when he brings Alex, everyone's like, you're full of crap here. This kid doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to put on a helmet. He's going to die. But the reason why it works is because Robert Preston is, for me, well known as the Music Man.
He's a what?
Huh?
He's a music man. He's a
Oh,
what? He's a what?
okay. Okay, I get it. It's late. But so, I mean, he's playing it the same way. He's just got that, like, I am going to sell you ice, even if you're an Eskimo. I'm going to sell you on anything. And it's just the working of that. I mean, you mentioned Beta and the interactions with his brother. It does so well. And Lance Guest, who really didn't do much after this, aside from be the host of documentaries for Last Starfighter.
Or Jaws 4.
He does an amazing job as both Alex and Beta. And one of the really interesting things is if you watch the film, there are some scenes, including the scene where Beta's head is on the table, where you can see he's wearing a terrible wig.
Yeah.
A terrible wig. And the reason why they did that was when they were making the film and then they finished it and they showed it, they were a little short on time and there wasn't much interactions back at Earth, but what they saw of Beta interacting with everybody, they really liked. So they decided to shoot a couple more scenes of Beta. Obviously, Lance had gone on to do other things, so his hair was cut short, so they had to put a wig on him. But the other thing that really is impressive about this is he had come down with terrible food poisoning when they were doing those reshoots. So he's off screen puking his guts out, and actually, it kind of works because at those scenes, Beta's looking a little bit kind of just gone. But it says something that the guy put a lot of effort into those scenes, even when he was having to come back for reshoots and having to deal with being sick. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah.
What else you like?
So for me, I really enjoyed, like you said, the cast of characters. All they all meshed well. I mean, between younger brother, older brother, Maggie and her interactions with Beta, you can tell the relationship she has with Alex. And then when Beta comes along, you can tell that relationship, like he wants to know about sex and everything. And it's just, I mean, I'm glad Nick Castle did this. Nick Castle, of course, is the director. He's not that big of a Hollywood name, but he is a director, but he's known for being the Shape in Halloween, the very first one, and he'll be reprising that role in the Halloween that's coming up. And what's funny is all these movies have a tie to horror. Maggie was in Night of the Comet, another 80s movie. Nick Castle was the original Michael Myers. Lance Guest was in Halloween 2. And then Dan O'Hurley, or how do you say his last name? O'Hurley, he was the antagonist in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. He was the witch. So for me, having that, going back and having those roots in horror, I'm like, okay, that's just kind of me and my personal preference. But when you have a film like this and you're using all CGI and you have Nick Castle come in and make a good movie and do those things, like you said, with the wing, and it just works, and knowing what you're having to deal with and what they had against them. I mean, you had a $15 million budget, and back in 1983, that's a lot of money, but that does not buy a supercomputer. So what they did with that film on that type of budget was extremely impressive for that time. So, I mean, just the whole filmmaking aspect of that movie is great.
Yeah, and I completely agree with all of that. I have no idea what you're talking about with the horror stuff. It's just not my bag. But I'll go with you on it. But, again, I cannot say enough how much I simply adore this film score. It was made by Craig Safan, and he's not known for too much. Stand and Deliver, I think, is what I'm looking at here, is the only other ones that I can really pay attention to. And he did the music for Cheers, the TV show. But I mean, it's so bombastic. It has a wonderful march to it. And like everything else in this movie, it's so uplifting. And, it just starts and then the trumpets blare. And it's a very heroic theme. And it's something that you can just kind of hum to. And every time they go into the crescendo, it makes you smile. I mean, I just freaking love this thing. And I also love the script. I mean, there's some really good lines in here. When his brother wakes up to see Beta's head on the table, and he just looks at him and is like, "You're having a bad dream. You're having a bad dream." Go to bed. Just in another scene where he tells the brother, "I'm going to tell mom where your Playboys are if you don't go away." It's just,
That's
but I think the best line is one of the lackeys for the Kodan Emperor. Is asking him, so what do we do now as the ship is crashing into the moon? And his little red little thing pops over his eye and goes, "We die." As a kid, I probably wore out my beta tape just rewinding to that from that scene over and over again. "We die," and it clicks on his eye. You can tell this the thing he had on his eye probably was set a little bit too close to his eye, so it clicks and he kind of jumps a little bit. And it's I just smile talking about this damn thing. It is one of my favorite movies. So, what are some things that maybe don't hold up with the movie?
To me, I look back on it, and I've already said the CGI is there. For me, God, I really can't think of anything. What doesn't hold up for me, the fact that you have a good movie, but back then it might not have seemed like it was good. But you have this adventure story, and you know it's very uplifting, and you leave it open for a potential sequel in the best way possible, and they don't jump on don't jump on it. You had mentioned that the film was made for 14, 15 million. The movie made 28. So, I mean, that was 13 million for the studio. But you have a movie that ends with Alex going up, ready to rebuild the Starfighter Academy on Rylos. You have little brother taking the controls, getting ready to fight. He's learning, and you have Zur escaping. I mean, to me, that's like, okay, build the franchise, do it. I mean, you had a good film. You did well with what you were giving with the special effects. So why not go for it? And they don't. For me, another thing, I just, you have all these characters around Alex in the trailer park. Alec is one that needs to be uplifted. But some of those minor characters in the trailer park you could have done without, because you have Grig, and Grig is a very good mentor. He's there supporting him in everything. He's someone I would look up to if he chose me, but you have another gentleman, I forget his name. Oh man, I've drawn a blank, but some of his lines were just not needed, and they were very, "Oh yeah, go Alex." I'm like, okay, that's just bad writing. You're trying to fill time at this point. So a little bit of if they would have dialed back on some of those minor characters and maybe focus more on, like, when they're getting ready to go into space and he's sitting there getting his debrief, and you see all these other great characters that have makeup, dive more into that. This is a space opera. Dive more into the alien aspect of it. Let's just not have cheesy American dialogue. "Oh, look at that. Oh, go get him, Alex." Sorry.
Them's are fighting words, sir. I love the trailer park. No, I mean, seriously, I would be all for meeting the pilots more. I mean, there's that octopus guy where he steps on his tentacle. Right. And
the original Davy Jones.
And you wonder how the hell that thing fits into a Gunstar. But whatever. But here's the thing. I completely disagree with you, and here's why.
Go for it.
This whole film is about America, and it's about the whole, and you said it yourself to begin with, is about no matter where you are in life, no matter how stuck you are, if you decide that you want to make something of yourself, you may need an alien to help you out, but you're going to be able to find a way to become something more than what you are, something more than the guy who fixes the plumbing and makes sure somebody's soap operas are not on the fritz. But you need the people's whose soap operas on the fritz to endear this kid as somebody who we care about. And that's the big thing that happens in the trailer park, is you have all of these characters who are able to kind of just endear themselves to both Alex and to us in order to better understand what's going on there. And it just makes it feel a lot better. I feel it was a very important choice that they made, because the original script, it was based in suburbia, like every other 80s film. And the writers actually said, this is too Spielberg. This is like E.T. and everything else. So they moved it to the trailer park, which I think makes it, instead of being middle upper class, Alex is lower class. You get the idea that this kid, like a lot of people, is just stuck. And not only is he uplifted and becomes the hero that saves the galaxy, but in doing so, everyone else gets more out of life than what they would have just sitting there in the trailer park. And you see his brother at the end being excited and running over to the arcade and starting to play the arcade because he wants to make sure that he gets called up next. It's just everyone leaves this movie with excitement for life that some of them didn't have at first. So I love it. I'm sorry.
Well, and see, I get what you're saying. Like, it humanizes Alex. He's going up to a race or to space where there's a lot of different other sci-fi humanities, and it humanizes Alex because he has that home base in the mobile home, and he is very close to people and he wants to fight for them. So I get that part. But to me, it's like, you're spending all this money on makeup. Why don't you explore those backstories or have them talk to more people instead of just stepping on their tentacle?
Or tentacle. Anything else you want to complain about?
No, that was it for me. I really wish they would have made a sequel. They set it up perfectly. I think they should have done it, and if they did it well, then they would have had a good sequel. But you never know with the 80s.
Well, and we will talk because there is talks of a sequel coming out. But before we talk about a sequel coming out, we got to talk about the spinoff that happened in 2004. The spinoff that no one knows happened for good reason, because I've listened to it and it's bad. There was an off-Broadway musical made of the Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
It came out in October 2004 in New York City, and then it went to a festival in 2006 and abruptly just disappeared.
What? Yeah.
It used to, the original cast recording was released, and I'm looking for it now. It used to be on Spotify, which is where I listened to it, but now it seems like Spotify has pulled it down. It was that bad. Let's see. I can't find it now. But even the title tracks were, yeah. I can't. I'm trying to find. Oh, here it is. I found it. I done found it. Okay. Starlight, Starbright. Somebody, somewhere, something. A place like this. Little did we know. Things change out of the world. Star League anthem. Father to son. Love is like water. It's Spring Break. Haze of the Heart. The battle theme. You can buy it for $18. I would not recommend it.
Good plug.
Because not only is it bad, but they can't sing either. It's pretty bad. I wish I could find it now so I could play a little bit of it, but it looks like the fates have decided to make it disappear off the face of the earth, and I think that's probably a good thing. Oh wait, no. Oh, I found it. Oh, a new musical, 2005. I found it. All 16 tracks.
Oh,
I will have to pick one to play on the podcast version.
Starlight, Starbright. Choose the best one.
Oh man. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna have to have some fun with this. But if you're watching the YouTube version, I can't do this because YouTube doesn't understand what parody is, and they don't understand what fair use is. So if I played it, I'll get copyrighted. So go check out the podcast at thefrontmoviereviews.com, and you can listen to the amazing Last Starfighter musical there because I'll splice them in. But yeah, so there was that spinoff, but we'll talk about the potential sequel here in a second. But before then, I kind of want to wrap up on this, and I want to hear from you what you feel the lasting effects of this is. Is it a movie that stands up, which we kind of already hit on a little bit, but just to recap, is it a movie that stands up? And along with that, is it a film that has stood the test of time in terms of, is it still relevant? And then give me your score, a grade score
on it. Is it still relevant? I'm going to say 100% yes. Just this year, we had a little film. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I was entertained. But we had a little film called Ready Player One. And Ready Player One is it has the same idea as Last Starfighter. You're sitting there playing the game to find your worth. I think I can see influence from Last Starfighter in a lot of films today. Like I just said, Ready Player One. It stands the test of time because it's still on TV. You can still catch it every once in a blue moon. You mentioned HBO. I remember the first time I watched it was TBS and TNT. And that's going back to my 8, 9-year-old self. And I remember because, again, loving horror, see Halloween on TV and be like, oh, that's the guy from Halloween too. And then you'd watch it, and then you'd watch it, become engrossed in this. But to me, the lasting legacy is, does it stand the test of time? Yes. Like I said, because in true 80s fashion, it doesn't break from that. It knows it's an 80s movie, and it accepts that, and it accepts the fact that it's using what it's got available, and it does it well. And of course, I'm referring to the CGI, and it's not just that. It's there's scenes where there's giant holographic heads. I mean, 1993, they do that with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Zordon. But the thing is the holographic head in Last Starfighter looks better than what was done in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's just some of the things that they did and to incorporate in this movie really paved the way for a lot of movies in the future. Shooting from the cockpit and looking around from the cockpit point of view. But again, I'm going to say this again. The message of the film, or at least what I picked up as a kid, is that destiny will find you. And if not, do something you're good at. And eventually something good is going to come your way. So find something that you're good at, divulge your time into it, and something good will come of it, just like it did for Alex. So, yeah, I ramble.
No. And what's your score? I mean, what's your
grade? My score, I'd give this a solid B, 8 out of 10. B plus.
Whatever. Okay. I think this is the kind of movie we need more of. I was talking to Brandon, my co-host for Zonasodes, and I was telling him, because we were talking about Robbie the Robot, because we were reviewing Invaders for Twilight Zone, which will come up here in a couple weeks. So check out Zonasodes. But we were talking about Robbie the Robot, and we were talking about Lost in Space. And I was telling him that he really needs to check out the new Lost in Space on Netflix, which unfortunately sounds like it's probably not going to get a season 2. But what really I liked about the new Lost in Space was it had a positive message. And I don't mean like, family friendly, like, let's go watch Barney or something. What I mean is it looks at the human race and says, we're going to be okay. We're going to do better than what we are now, much like Star Trek. And we don't have that anymore. Instead, we have, and I think this really started with Battlestar Galactica, we have Battlestar Galactica where everyone is just, either depressed or killing somebody. And it's most of our sci-fi nowadays is post-apocalyptic, or the humans are bad, or we're never going to be able to advance as a species. And this is the kind of movie that tells kids not only that, you will find something that fits for you and you will become something better than what you are, but it also says that we as a species can be something better. And I think that's something that's sorely lacking in sci-fi now. And I wish we had more of it. And that's why I'm hoping that if they do make a sequel to this or a reboot, that they keep that naivete, that idea that you can look up to the stars and be excited. I really hope they keep that, and I think they will. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But for me, I think everything that is old is new when it comes to the 80s anymore. You mentioned Ready Player One. Ready Player One borrows heavily from this film, but more so the next book that came out from Ernest Cline, Armada, which wasn't really good, is Last Starfighter, to a point where the kid is playing a video game and then he gets called up by the Earth Defense Force to fight aliens because the game was there to get to know who could handle the fighting the spaceships and stuff. It really is the Last Starfighter, only done worse. But it has been optioned for a film. So Ready Player One didn't make buku bucks in the theaters, but I'm sure Armada will be coming to us sooner or later, for better or worse. But so yeah, I think this does hold up, as we've already mentioned. But I also hope that people who may not have seen this before take a moment and just go check it out, because I think you're missing out on a piece of 80s film, but a piece of just American film that I don't think many people have seen unless you were born from 1980 to 1986. But it's something that I think really does hold up, and I wish more people would see it. And I'm going to give it an A. It is, if I have to sit down and list the top 15, 20 films ever for me, this is going to be on the list. I don't know if it's in my top 10, but it's very close. I think it is almost a perfect film, and for what it is. So I love it a lot. When I started making flashbacks over 2 years ago now, and before I took a very long hiatus on flashbacks, oops. This was one of the first films I wrote down on a piece of paper when I was saying what kind of movies we want to do for the show. So I'm very, very glad we finally got a chance to talk about it. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the potential sequel. So one of the kids who saw this when they were a kid happened to be Seth Rogen, which shared his name with Alex. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, or if that maybe ingrained the character onto Seth or not. But he is
stoned when he watched it.
potentially. He is definitely he's been trying to get this movie going for a very long time. February 2008 is when the production company said they were going to make a sequel to it, and then it's kind of floundered for a while. But then just recently, in April of this year, the screenwriter Gary Whitta, who also wrote Rogue One, which I won't hold against him, even though I think Rogue One is way overrated. It's the best of the prequels, and I haven't seen Solo yet, and I probably won't in the theater. But Rogue One's the best of the prequels. But he posted some concept art on his Twitter account, and it looked pretty good. And he, much like Rogan and the other guys, have pointed out that he grew up on this film. So I'm looking forward to seeing somebody who is a fan try to do this. They've said it's gone back between a reboot and a sequel and so forth and so on. But they're definitely looking on trying to put it together for a new generation to see. So my question for you, Ryan, is: would you rather a reboot or a sequel? And do you think this is going to work?
Here's what my feeling about reboots. We live in an age where Hollywood cannot figure out what new ideas are, so they're constantly going back and rebooting everything. I know I'm not saying everything, but they're using a lot of old ideas and revamping them to modernism. That being said, I would prefer that they do a sequel. I mean, that was my biggest letdown with this movie, is that they did not pursue that. Why not have a movie 30 years later, 30 some years later, and Lewis missing his brother, now he's 35, thinking his life is in shambles, and have his brother come down and be like, hey, I need you. I mean, that's just the perfect way to do it. And then Zurg, goes off into space and finds a new army to control, and is now being a threat again. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you can do this. Or Maggie's back on Earth and she had a kid, and he's now, he's 18 years old, doesn't know who his dad is, and his dad. I mean, there's so many different things that you could do with the sequel. I mean, I don't even work for Hollywood, and I'm giving you ideas that are actually doable. I think if you try to remake it, you're gonna fall into that cycle of reboot is trash. There are a few reboots that are okay, but reboot is trash. It worries me. But if it's done right, and if you have someone like Seth Rogen or even Steven Spielberg who are attached in some way, shape, or form, you could get a decent remake. So fingers crossed. I would love to see Last Starfighter with our visual effects and see how they do that. Like, that's I'm okay with. But but then you're looking at two separate films: Starfighter of the '80s, Starfighter of the 2010s. But But again, if it's done right, I would be open to a reboot. But I worry. I say bring on the sequel. Do a sequel, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of torn on this. I think if they could get the original cast, the ones who are still living, so basically Lance Guest is who you really need. Um, I think it's got a potential to be kind of what you mentioned, but I would also be okay with a reboot if it keeps itself as a spiritual connection to the original.
And that's hard to do.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And more films fail at it than not. But the reason why I think it would work more as a potential reboot is it gives you what you're looking for, and that is franchisability. Because if you have an older Alex, who at this point would probably be in his 50s, showing back up, it's not going to have that same appeal to kids that just redoing the story would. And the story could potentially make sense here in the fact that nowadays the Department of Defense is grabbing drone pilots from kids who play PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah.
So it very much could easily be something where you either get Sony or you get Microsoft to pay you buku bucks for the marketing and make it connected with that, and then you just have the kid get plucked the same kind of way. The other thing, if it's going to work, either sequel or reboot, it must be able to do, as I mentioned earlier, use the mixture of practical and CGI well. Do not go down the path of the prequels of Star Wars where you just have everyone in a green screen room and you hope for the best. You need to have the practical effects. You need to have that depth of vision. And I would love to see the entire Star League out there doing their thing. Maybe, and this was all done for budgetary reasons, instead of just blowing up the headquarters where everyone's sitting there waiting to fly out, you actually start out with a huge space battle where the Armada just kicks the crap out of the Star League. And then you get to see it will build up Alex more too, because you'll get to see, these 20, 30, 40 ships just get decimated. So there's no way this one kid in one ship could handle it. And it just builds up that heroism even more. But I think a sequel can't do that. A retelling can. But, I mean, I was very much against Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, because it was going to be a reboot / sequel. And I love that film.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I mean, I think they could potentially do it either way. I see more of an ability for the film to have more of a grasp on the younger generation if they just start over with the story. And the story is a timeless story, the hero's journey. I think it would work out well either way. But I want to see it happen, because I will be the first freaking guy in the theater when it does drop, if it ever does. And hopefully it's better than Armada, the book, because that book sucks. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about this movie. I could talk about this movie for forever. And again, if you're listening to this and you've never seen it, I will loan you my copy of the Blu-ray. Just check it out. It's so well worth it. Anything else you want to say to wrap things up?
To me, again, the movie's central message of finding who you are in the face of adversity, realizing that you have talent even though you're stuck doing different odd jobs and it's not really what you want to do. I think this movie needs to be shown to the younger generation, instill that idea that you are good at something, but you're gonna have to work for it. It's if you could show a movie in class and teach character development, Alex's character development in this film is great. And you could literally pick apart, how his handling decisions and how it's affecting him, and going back and realizing that, this is his shot. This is his opportunity to make a difference. And the lead up to that is spectacular. So that central message is something that needs to get shown in a way, because it's very watered down for kids nowadays, Whereas when you have a decent plot and a good story like Last Starfighter, where it does that gradual build-up, I mean, that's brilliant storytelling. That's brilliant filmmaking. We need more of that for our kids nowadays so they can see that that's how you develop your character. It's okay to have doubts about yourself and go through decisions, but it's when you finally build that confidence that you can do it is what matters, instead of just being thrown into a situation like, oh, I can do this. So, yeah, it's just a great message for me.
Perfect. And then on the one thing I will say that I left out intentionally, because much like the film, you only use it once and you use it when you're all done. The Death Blossom is amazing. As I mentioned, my Betamax tape, if I didn't wear it out with the We Die, I wore it out with the wait until they're all in range. Alex, wait. Now! His chair spinning around. Like, oh, it is so Deus Ex Machina. Oh my god, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
I want to have a Gunstar model. I don't think anyone makes them, but I want to have a Gunstar at my desk at work. I mean, I've got Optimus. I need a Gunstar. I don't.
Well, if they reboot the movie, maybe.
Yeah, and it better look the same. Again, I could talk about this movie all day. They went out to a guy who works for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and said, design us a spaceship that would work in space. So that's why it doesn't have wings. It has the wraparound, and why it has jets everywhere. So it can use air to move around instead of having to fire a main thruster, which makes no freaking sense in space. Oh my god, this movie is amazing. Okay. You can find us at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. You can find us on Facebook at The Front Row Movie Reviews. You can find us on Twitter at Front Row Reviews with a Z, because the Z is cool. You can send us your hate mail at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, thank you. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't break your camera or your video screen. And please make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notify button, because we do live events like we did here. And we'd love to have you in the chat room so we can talk to you about these films as we're talking about them. And then if you're listening to the podcast version, please make sure you subscribe to us. And then give us a review on your podcast app of choice, be it iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever. Those reviews really help us get more people to take a look at us. And I swear we'll be coming back. Ryan is going to be a regular from now on, because he keeps bugging me to record these, so I need him around to make sure I do it. And next time, we will be talking about an amazing crossover. A crossover for the ages. And that is when an Ewok met Batman. And I will leave it at that. So until next time, I am Scott, and with me has been
Ryan.
And I will leave you with this. Victory or death. Victory or death. Victory or death.
We die.